The music was deafening, lights flashing across my peaceful pasture, and I could barely believe my eyes. My own land had been transformed into a chaotic festival by the HOA Queen herself, without my permission. I watched from the fence, gripping my coffee, heart pounding, and then I remembered my bowls. Things were about to get interesting. I've lived on this small stretch of land for over a decade, nestled just beyond the last row of suburban houses. My mornings usually begin with the soft lowing of my bulls and the rustle of tall grass swaying in the breeze. It's a peaceful, simple life, just me, my animals, and the occasional neighbor waving from their driveways. I wasn't looking for drama, just a quiet farmstead where I could unwind from the chaos of the world. The HOA, or as I like to call them, the self-appointed neighborhood royalty, have always hovered around the edge of my property, constantly policing the tiniest infractions. But none were as bold, or as ridiculous, as the so-called HOA Queen, a woman with a penchant for drama and a flair for control. She was always impeccably dressed, her hair and nails perfect, a sparkling smile masking a mind that seemed wired for confrontation. I kept my distance, mostly, thinking if I ignored her theatrics, she'd eventually run out of energy. Trouble first started innocently enough, small complaints about my unkempt pasture edges, whispers about my animals being intimidating to neighbors, and letters from the HOA hinting at potential fines. At first, I chuckled. My bulls weren't pets, they were livestock, and I had every right to care for them on my land. But the tension grew when one afternoon, I noticed a crowd assembling near my property line. At first, I thought it was a community event, maybe a harmless gathering. But as the thrum of music and laughter reached my ears, my heart sank. Looking closer, I realized my pasture, the very heart of my farm, was being transformed into a festival, complete with tents, loudspeakers, and a makeshift stage. I had not given permission, nor had I signed off on any HOA plan. The audacity of it left me stunned, my mind racing. It wasn't just trespassing anymore, it was an outright takeover of my land. As soon as I realized what was happening, I tried to reason with the festival organizers. I walked up to the edge of my pasture, hands raised in a calm gesture, and said, "This is private property. You need to stop." The woman I later learned was the HOA Queen waved me off with a flourish of her manicured hand and replied, "Oh, darling, it's just a little community fun. You're welcome to join." Her voice was saccharine, but her eyes had that sharp glint I'd come to recognize, the kind that screams entitlement. Within minutes, the music volume cranked up, and the festival goers began encroaching further into my land. People were stepping over fences, tripping over my cattle's water troughs, and even trying to take selfies next to my bulls. I was livid but still tried to keep my composure. I grabbed my phone to call the HOA board, thinking they might rein in their rogue member. Predictably, my calls went straight to voicemail. Next came the letters. Threats slipped under my gate, claiming I was harboring dangerous animals that could harm festival attendees, and that I was in violation of HOA safety regulations. I read them over and over, incredulous. Dangerous animals? My bulls were calm, trained, and well-fed. The absurdity of the claims only fueled my frustration. I felt helpless watching people treat my land like a theme park while the HOA Queen strutted around in her heels, barking orders like she owned the place. Things escalated further when she organized impromptu activities right over my pasture's feeding area, scattering my livestock and forcing me to intervene physically to keep the animals from panicking. One of my bulls, usually docile, charged at a tent that had been set up in the middle of his resting spot, narrowly missing a few festival goers. I was fuming. This was not only trespassing but endangering both my animals and the people around. By the end of the afternoon, it was clear, the HOA Queen didn't just want a festival, she wanted control. My patience had worn thin, and my mind started spinning with the idea that maybe it was time to fight back. But carefully, smartly, and in a way that would ensure my land remained mine. By late afternoon, the chaos had reached its peak. One of my bulls, already agitated from the constant intrusion, broke through a flimsy temporary fence the HOA Queen had set up. People screamed and scattered, tents toppled, and I could see the panic on the Queen's face for the first time. She stumbled back, trying to wave people away, but her confidence had vanished. That moment was my breaking point. I realized nothing I had tried, polite warnings, calls to the HOA, even letting people join the fun, had worked. My property was being treated like a public playground, and my authority was completely ignored. Watching my livestock get stressed and my land trampled ignited a determination I hadn't felt in years. I knew I had to act, and I had to act decisively. No more waiting for board approvals, no more polite discussions. The next time she tried to treat my pasture like her personal festival ground, she would face consequences she couldn't ignore. By the end of that day, I had made up my mind. It wasn't just about protecting my land anymore, it was about teaching the HOA Queen a lesson she would never forget. Every detail of my next move had to be calculated, precise, and undeniable. The stage was set, and I was ready to turn frustration into action. I wasn't interested in a public brawl or anything that would get someone hurt. What I wanted was a clean, unavoidable way to reclaim my land, and I had a few advantages they didn't: knowledge of the animals, a calm head, and the law on my side if I chose to use it. Step 1 was documentation. I photographed the temporary fencing, the stage setup, and the tents pressed right up to my feeding paddocks. I recorded the music level with my phone and logged times when the bulls first began to pace. I also asked a neighbor with a drone to take a few overhead shots. Proof of trespass from above is hard to deny. Step 2. I called the sheriff and filed an official trespass complaint. I wasn't bluffing, I wanted deputies on paper and in position. The dispatcher agreed to send a patrol to monitor the situation and advised me how to safely manage the animals while things were sorted. Having law enforcement on standby shifted the dynamic from he said she said to formal procedure. Step 3 was practical animal management. I double-checked gates, moved the calves into a secure pen, and, importantly, prepared a safe corridor in the pasture. Bulls move predictably when funneled, they'll follow noise and curiosity if given a channel. I didn't prod them or prod the crowd. Instead, I closed off escape routes near the barn and created a wide, clear lane that would steer the herd away from any structures, and, crucially, toward the edge of the field where people were standing. Mini twist 1, the HOA Queen was live-streaming the whole thing, bragging about bringing culture to the countryside. Her mic picked up one of the volunteer coordinators admitting they had no permits for food service or amplified sound. I clipped that audio and sent it to the county's code enforcement line. Mini twist 2, a deputy suggested a short, polite PA announcement, safety first wording, that would trigger an organized, non-panic exit. So, when the animals naturally drifted toward the commotion, deputies were there to manage a calm evacuation while my documentation and the coordinator's admission bundled into a formal citation packet. I wasn't looking for humiliation's sake. I wanted a lawful, unmistakable reset, evidence, official presence, and a little nudge of nature to make sure everyone left and remembered whose land it really was. The deputies arrived just as the sun was lowering, calm faces and clear purpose. One of them stepped up to the temporary stage and picked up the mic. "Folks," he said, steady and polite, "we've received complaints about unpermitted activity on private property. For your safety, please begin a peaceful and orderly exit." It sounded bureaucratic, almost boring, which was exactly what I wanted. While the deputy spoke, I opened the gate at the far edge of the pasture and guided the herd into the corridor I'd prepared. The bulls, curious and unnerved by the music, followed the wide lane toward the noise like ships toward a lighthouse. I didn't prod them, I simply walked along the fence line, moving with deliberate calm so the animals felt guided rather than threatened. As the herd drifted, the atmosphere shifted. People stopped dancing. Tents rustled. Karen, still streaming, turned the camera toward the approaching line of animals, and her smile curdled. Her live feed, the one where she crowed about community spirit, filled with the reality she'd ignored: mixer trucks and grills with no permits, volunteers admitting they hadn't secured sanitation, and now, a procession of half-ton bulls moving right through the middle of her festival. No one was trampled. No one got hurt. That was the point. The spectacle wasn't chaos, it was consequence. Deputies gently shepherded people to the exits, handing out notices and citations. Vendors packed up. The stage crew unplugged speakers. In 15 minutes, the field was empty, save for tire ruts and a scattering of abandoned paper cups. Karen's live video kept looping, her own voice proving the negligence and entitlement that had started the mess. Where she had tried to make a show of generosity, she was now the headline, unpermitted organizer, cited by county, and watched leaving the field in silence. By the next morning, the pasture looked almost normal, though the tracks of hooves and the flattened remnants of festival tents served as a vivid reminder of what had happened. The deputies had filed their official reports, and Karen now had a stack of citations for unpermitted event hosting, sanitation violations, and trespassing issues she had ignored. The HOA board convened in an emergency session, and whispers of accountability spread like wildfire. For the first time, neighbors openly questioned her authority and the legitimacy of the festival she had imposed on private land. I spent the day repairing minor damage, resetting fences, checking gates, and making sure the pasture was safe for the herd. My bulls grazed peacefully, unaware of the commotion they had caused but perfectly content in their roles as unlikely enforcers of boundaries. Several neighbors came by, some chuckling, some shaking their heads in disbelief, and a few expressing relief that someone had finally stood up to the overreach that had been quietly building in the community for years. The HOA had no choice but to retract its heavy-handed stance, and Karen faced both legal and social consequences for her actions. Invitations to future, community events on my property were politely declined before they were even sent. The balance had been restored, not through anger or recklessness, but through measured, clever, and undeniable action. Looking back, the whole experience taught me something crucial: standing up for your rights doesn't have to be aggressive or chaotic, it just has to be smart, precise, and unwavering. Sometimes, those who believe they can bulldoze over others need a firm reminder that boundaries exist for a reason. My bulls were the perfect, unexpected enforcers of fairness, and while it was a little chaotic at the moment, the outcome was satisfying and just. For anyone watching, remember, protecting what's yours doesn't mean losing your dignity. Planning carefully, staying calm, and acting decisively can turn even the most outrageous situations around. And if you enjoy these real-life HOA stories with clever, satisfying twists, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Hit that button and stay tuned. There are plenty more stories where justice gets served, one creative step at a time.